Welcome to an all-new episode of Her Playbook, a podcast highlighting inspiring stories of women in sports, business, and athletics. My name is Madelyn Burke, and I'm joined this week by Selena Samuela, Peloton instructor. She does high-energy tread strength classes, challenging both the body and mind. And I'm so excited to have you here, Selena. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. And you absolutely nailed the pronunciation of my name.
I love that. I know you're from Italy. And so the actual pronunciation of your name is a little bit more Italian, correct?
Yes, right. So I was born and raised in Italy, and my mom's Italian. And when she named me thinking like we were going to be in Italy. So if we were in Italy, I would be Selena Samuela. But like, that's really not the easiest name to pronounce for an American, but you absolutely nailed it. You did a great job.
We're doing our best. Yeah. I'm so excited to have you here for so many reasons. You do so many inspiring classes on Peloton. And I feel like Peloton is one of those forums in which, people taking your classes feel such a connection with the instructors. It feels like, oh, I know Selena. I know, so-and-so and such because of that connection. But how did you first get involved in Peloton?
Yeah, so it was a really long story. So I moved to New York from Hawaii. I'd gone to school there, and I really just felt drawn to the arts, and I had the big dreams of being an actor, writer, director, and all those things. So I moved to the city. I went to Stella Adler Studio of Acting. I, was trying to audition, and it just it was really hard. I wasn't getting gigs. Eventually, I found myself teaching fitness. I got my certification as a personal trainer, which is also a crazy way that I got there because I wasn't getting jobs, and I wanted to get my foot in the door, and I wanted to get my SAG card.
Yeah.
And one of my friends was a stunt coordinator, and he was like, you're really fit and you're active in fitness. He's like, why don't you try doing some stunt work? And that's a way to get your foot in the door, and maybe from there you can build and start an acting career. And I was like, oh, amazing, great idea. So he was like, you really have to perfect a fight technique. And I was like, all right, well, I was doing some boxing for fitness at the time. So I was like, all right, let me dig into boxing. So I really dug into boxing, and I'm just the kind of person that doesn't, okay, I'm going to curse a little bit. Is that okay? I don't half-ass anything. So I really devoted so much of, my time and energy to this technique, and I fell in love with it. And somebody was like, you're really pretty good at this. You should start fighting. And I competed as a boxer for a little bit. And that kind of led me into teaching fitness because I was working in restaurants and stuff at the time. And it just wasn't aligning with who I was as a person, right? Because you're working late at night, and then, it's just really hard to have a healthy schedule and a healthy lifestyle when you're working those kinds of jobs. So I was like, all right, let's, start working in fitness. This is something I love. This is something I'm good at while I'm trying to do all these other things. Then I got recruited by someone who had a boxing fitness gym, essentially. Yeah. And they were teaching, they were doing, what do you call it? Classes with multiple people in class. What do you call it? Group fitness. Thank you. Wow.
Okay. They were doing group fitness.
Group fitness. I love that I forgot group fitness, and I literally teach group fitness, but that's okay.
It's the little things.
It's the little things. So group fitness, they were teaching group fitness classes that had boxing in it, and I said, all right, cool. This sounds like I'm aligned with this. And then I became a personal trainer as well. So then that's how I was kind of supporting myself. And then Rebecca Kennedy was the master instructor at Peloton at the time. Mm. She was one of my clients. She came to my classes, and she was like, I love your classes. Come and audition for Peloton. And I swear to you, I knew the moment I walked in there, I knew I was going to get this job. I was like, all the auditions I've ever been on in my whole entire life, right. I went in there with apprehension, really just feeling kind of insecure about am I going to get this gig? I don't know, really not feeling it. This one, I walked in the door and I was like, this is mine.
Yeah.
I know this is mine. Everything I've done in my life has led me to this moment, and it just made so much sense. It's all the things that I'd been doing my whole life, studying acting and, being involved in fitness and loving the lifestyle, healthy lifestyle of working out and exercising, boom, came together in this amalgamation, this perfect job opportunity for me. And it happened.
That is so incredible. And I love how, so many of us experience this. There's the path we think we're going to go down, the path we pursue. and then the path that opens up in front of us. And that one ends up almost being more appropriate and more on the nose for who we are. And like you said, there's everything that kind of came together. There's a performative aspect of Peloton.
Yes.
There's like that, the acting, there's the fitness. And, you know, you've grown up. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. You're born in Italy. Your family, athletics is very important in your family.
Huge.
You had a lot of soccer players in your family as well. And, you know, you moved to the U.S. when you were, 11? But talk about just kind of growing up in Italy and around that environment and how that planted the seed of the importance of physical fitness for you.
I mean, so yeah, my Uncle Paolo specifically like really did well in soccer and rose up all the way to Serie B, which, you know, for Italian soccer is quite wonderful. Serie A is like the top level. It would be like, I guess, the equivalent of the NFL or whatever. Like if you were to have like
NFL and Serie B is like the CFL almost, right?
It's like just the level right underneath, or I guess it would be like playing like college football at one of the like top schools. Like it would be like the equivalent to that, but we just don't have like college sports the way the US does.
Sure.
So anyway, it was a huge part of my life growing up, going to my uncle's games, and just how important sports were to my family. And also but the physical active lifestyle of my family, they're a family of farmers. So like, you know, my grandfather now in his 80s still like is out there trying to move, and like, like we have to be like, no, dude, like you cannot drive that tractor anymore.
Right?
Like, you know, so it's like, it's, being active, being physical is just, it's always been part of who I am. It's part of who we are.
Right. And it's something that has translated to so many different walks of life. You mentioned you went to college in Hawaii, picked up surfing out there. Yeah. That is one of those things too. I grew up in LA. I love to surf. Are you longboard or shortboard?
Both. Any board.
Wow.
Any board. Yeah.
Okay, that's impressive. 'Cause I'm a longboard, but the shortboard, that's just a whole nother beast.
I'm much better. I'm a better shortboarder just because I spent so much more time shortboarding.
Sure. Yeah.
But I like any board shape is like, I love riding any wave, any board. Yeah.
Yeah. And that takes it's a different type of endurance, you know, for people who aren't swimmers, it's a lot of upper body strength and all that kind of stuff. How did you fall in love with surfing?
Oh my God. So actually that was kind of the catalyst to get me out to Hawaii, because I didn't really 100% know what I wanted to do.
Right.
But I got the surfing bug like on a few trips, like during the summer to New Jersey, and like I did a summer in Martha's Vineyard, and I was like, dude, the surfing thing is so much fun. I want to do this all the time. And so when I was like, well, since I don't have a clear direction academically with what I want to do, like I'm just going to go to the place that like would offer me like what I would want to do outside of school, which was surfing.
Vibes. Yes.
So that's how I ended up out there. And I fell in love with it. It was just, it was such a challenge to progress, because it requires so many hours. Right. You can't just like go out there and like on day one be like, all right, I'm going to do like a sick cutback. Like it takes years to like get to that point. And like, it also just like, there's something about being out in nature and like working with nature to achieve something incredible, like riding a wave.
Right.
It's really special.
Yeah. And I mean, and also challenging yourself in different ways. And I feel like in reading about you and in looking into who you are before we met today and before we did this podcast, one of the things I love is like the different ways in which you challenge yourself, you know, with surfing, with golf. Every time, you know, I feel like throughout the years, there were different benchmarks. You could say, okay, I'm trying to get my golf score here. I'm trying to get it there.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've really pursued that and shaving points off that.
Yeah.
Golf is another one too that you picked up a little bit later in life, right?
Yeah, totally. Something that I think like there's so many similarities in surfing and golf. Maybe from like the nerdy like like fitness expert version of me would go like, oh yeah, like rotational sports and like balance and all that stuff.
Yeah, the NASM version of
exactly.
Like it's like these muscles, those muscles. Yeah.
But also kind of the more Zen version, you know, where you do have to center. It is also an individual sport. It's not about anybody else. Like it all comes down to you, right? Like whatever somebody else is doing on their wave or whatever game the other person's playing has nothing to do with your game. Like you have to like, you're responsible for your game.
Right.
And that's kind of cool. But also, you know, in surfing, like you can't hesitate. Like once you choose to go on a wave, like if you hesitate, that's when bad things happen. And
right.
It's kind of the same with golf. It's like you can't mid-swing be like, oh, I'm going to hesitate or do like that's going to end up a disastrous, it'll be a disastrous swing.
Right. And that's translatable in so many walks. In football, if you hesitate on a pass, you'll get picked off. If you hesitate, you'll get, whatever. In life, if you hesitate on a decision,
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of about the doing it in the now.
Right.
And it's actually something I say a lot in my classes. What you practice is what you get good at. And you got to practice the thing now, not later, now.
Yeah. Because so often people will be like, okay, when I get to this stage in life, then I will be this. But in reality, like you're saying, you got to be this to get you to that stage in life, right? And practice the habits. I read something, it was do the daily habits that the person you want to be would do, or the best version of yourself would do. And I'm like, that is really incredible and inspiring, because so often people are like, I'm going to sleep in today. I don't have to get up. I'm going to do this. I'll do that later. I'll procrastinate. And
exactly.
It's would the best version of yourself do that? Would the highest version of yourself do that? It's so interesting too. So with these, you're teaching Peloton, you're doing all this stuff, but you're also not new anymore, but a young mother. You have a 2-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And that is so incredible, going through that journey as a woman. As an athlete, the amount of changes your body goes through and the amount of joy and emotion. But, I saw that you were going to train for your very first triathlon.
Yes.
Right after, and then realized I'm going to have to push this back because I'm realizing now I'm reacclimating with my body. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, that was a big lesson. I really had to check myself there, and I had to check my ego. And I think what I took away from that is that you can't assign yourself an experience. If you do that, you're going to set yourself up for probably disappointment, especially with something like having a baby. It's so unpredictable. Pregnancy is really unpredictable, and it's really magical and wonderful, but it can also be kind of scary in that way.
Sure.
And you just don't know how your body is going to react to that experience. You also don't know if you'll have a C-section or a natural, but there's so many things that can happen in the process. And so, yeah, I really did. That was the mistake I made, is that I assigned myself a postpartum experience. I'm like, oh, this is how it's going to be. And then as soon as I have, and then I'm going to start training on this day, and then da-da-da. And it was just really unrealistic to the experience I had. And
sure.
I'm going to just say it. I gained 70 pounds in my pregnancy, which is, it's not nothing. It's above what was recommended. And granted, I had a very healthy baby and everything was okay, but it made it a lot more challenging to get back to the physical activities that I had planned for myself.
Right.
And that was how my body reacted to pregnancy. And that is what and thank God, I had this beautiful, healthy baby. And so I'm not complaining, but it was certainly a challenge that I didn't expect to deal with. And so training for a triathlon didn't make sense in the time frame that I thought didn't make sense. But what did end up working out was, by the time I saw the New York City Marathon was coming up in November. So by the time I was maybe 6.5 months postpartum, which was the time that I would have had this triathlon.
Right.
Insane, right? Because you have to train.
Yeah.
So
it's
yeah, I thought I was going to start training for this triathlon at 2 months postpartum. Nah.
Yeah.
No. But that was more realistic. And so that made so much more sense for me. And I was really happy that I was able to kind of let go of this idea of the triathlon, give myself some grace, because what it did is it allowed space for this other really great achievement that I accomplished that I'm super proud of.
Yeah.
Was running a marathon 10 months postpartum. And honestly, when I think back on it, I'm like, wow, that was so amazing. But at the time, in the very beginning, I was so hard on myself about not being able to train for this triathlon. I remember feeling so upset with myself that my body wasn't cooperating with me. But what I learned is that my body was cooperating with me. It actually gave me an enormous gift of my son.
Yeah.
And it was just doing its thing in the time that it needed to do.
Right.
And so, yeah, not assigning yourself an experience, I think is kind of the best way to go, and to kind of just work with it day by day and just,
Yeah, and just lock in. I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, we see, covering the Giants, you see so many football players go through these injuries and come back and say, okay, I'm going to be ready to play by this day, but you got to kind of listen to your body and adjust. Yes. And especially for an athlete and a competitive person, much like yourself, I mean, the very first marathon you ran, you won. Like, I just need to say that again for the people watching and listening. This woman, the very first time she decided, I'm going to run a marathon, she won the thing.
I did.
Like, that is, like, I think most people are like, I just want to finish. I just want to get there without throwing up.
Yeah.
And you won it. That's an incredible accomplishment. And that is just kind of a testament to the athlete you are.
Thank you. It was wild. I didn't expect to I wasn't gunning to win the race. And I came in first overall for females. It wasn't
still,
but and let's level set. It also was not the New York City Marathon. It was a marathon in Nova Scotia. It was a small marathon. There were only 450 participants or something.
But of them, you won it.
Yes.
You came in first.
I did.
I think that even if you want to say in the most downplayed way, the very first time you said, I'm going to run 26.2 miles, you did it the fastest out of anybody out there.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a really cool experience. Yeah. I remember at one point looking around and being like, dude, am I alone out here? I'm coming in first.
Did I take a wrong turn?
I was like, oh my God. It was amazing. But that was actually, that contributed to why I had to kind of let go of some of the ego when I ran the New York City Marathon after having my baby, because I knew, even though I was, ready to train for something like that, I wasn't ready to train for it at the paces that would have been competitive with my last marathon, right?
Right.
I was ready.
You set that standard for yourself in a way, yeah.
Exactly. So I had to shift. I had to adjust. I had to say, okay, well, what is possible for me right now, and then push a little bit past that, right? So then it was just kind of okay, let's do the thing that's going to keep my body running, going to keep me healthy, so I can continue to teach classes, but that's also going to get me across that finish line. And so I trained at a pace that was way slower than anything I'd ever trained at before.
Right.
But it made sense for me, and I had nice, solid, even splits, and I crossed the finish line with a smile and could go and hang out with my son and play with him after the race. And that was the goal. And it was great.
Is there, something that you've learned about yourself in, the last 5-10 years, perhaps, that you think, wow, this is something that has changed my view. And this is something that I find so important to share with the audience that I've built?
That's an interesting question. I think off the top of my head, and I guess this is more personal because I think this can vary person to person, but for me personally, I've found that allowing myself to be vulnerable and to share my stories, my various stories through life experiences, has been to great personal benefit, but I also feel like it's allowed me to grow in community. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about because that sounds really vague. But I recently went through pregnancy loss.
I'm so sorry.
And I felt, at the time when it happened, I felt so alone and isolated.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking I did some research on it, obviously, and found that so many women actually go through it, and it's such a common thing. So I chose to share about that experience, even though it was a really scary thing to do.
Right.
But I had planned, and as one would, I'd planned to announce my pregnancy, and I had shared that with my employer, and we had a date set for when I was going to announce my pregnancy, in my second trimester. And I ended up using that date to actually announce my loss, and my loss happened pretty close. I was an early second trimester pregnancy loss. And so I used that date, and I felt really empowered by this because I felt that so many women go through an experience like this, feeling isolated, feeling like they don't have community. And think about it, your entire first trimester, you're hiding that you're pregnant.
Right.
And you're hiding that you're pregnant because probably to avoid any sort of public display of grief or whatever, if in case you do lose a baby.
And usually they say once you get out of the first trimester, it's you're in the clear.
You're in the clear.
Right.
But I thought about it and I was but what an isolating thing it is for all of us. So we're hiding. The first trimester can be the hardest trimester for a lot of us, right? Because you're sick all the time. Yeah. You're essentially kind of lying about why you're not having a drink or you're fake drinking.
Yeah.
And you're there are all these aspects to it that just don't feel awesome, right? You're
yeah.
oh yeah, I must have eaten something bad and that's why I'm throwing up. in the middle of a meeting. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Don't mind me.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, so already just like having to like kind of this essentially hiding of like the fact that you're going through this first trimester and you're going through it and it sucks and you can't like lean on people while you're like, lean on your community is already difficult enough. And then when you go through a loss, you're further isolated because you're like, oh, I just went through this horrible first trimester and now I'm going through this terrible thing and I can't share about that either because then that's taboo and it's like weird and people don't want to do. So I was just like, you know what? I think we should really, if this is such a normal thing, I hate to say normal because it's a horrible, common is the word, right? If this is such a common thing and so many of us are going through this, I think that we should feel that we could be in community on this topic and that we shouldn't feel afraid to share these things. And we should feel empowered to share them. So I shared about it and the response that I got was overwhelming. Thousands of people reached out sharing their own stories. And it wasn't like, it wasn't like something that you would expect where you're like, oh, this is so sad and I'm going to feel sad. All the stories were stories of hope.
Right.
I went through a loss and then I had my baby 6 months later, or I had my rainbow baby 6 months later, or I went through a loss and then I adopted my son like a year later. And like all these wonderful stories of like, there's light on the other side of this,
right.
Which was so helpful for me. And I think it was healing for just the folks in my community as well, where they were able to share about their stories. And some of these people were like, this is the first time I've ever shared about this, but here it is. And so I think like, letting down your guard a little bit can really offer something wonderful. It can offer a lot of opportunity in a way that I hadn't expected.
Right.
And so I guess that's maybe I think that's probably one of the more inspiring or lessons that I've learned in the past like five to 10 years. Yeah,
absolutely. And like you said, it's one of those things that when you're going through it, it feels so isolating. It feels so, singular. And then you recognize when you put it out into the ether just how many other people have similar experiences and that sense of community. I love that word community that you come back to because having other people and a support system and building that in an authentic way, it takes bravery too to be able to say, hey, here's this that I'm going through. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be open. And to do that in a platform like you have with, some people who they feel like they know you quite well because they get to experience you and all that. And to you, some of them are, regular names that you see on the board or whatever,
Sure.
But now you're developing this sense of real community and building that. And that's one of the things that I feel like, the Peloton community has built as well, but also just girlhood and womanhood in general.
Absolutely.
It's important for
I love that, girlhood and womanhood. I think absolutely. Because the last thing, when you go through something like that, right, the last thing I wanted was for anybody else out there to feel like it made them any less of a woman
right.
or any less of a caring mother or, whatever it is that you might think when you're going through something like that alone.
Yeah.
You almost like you want to lend a hand or lend strength or lend support out to someone else who might be going through something similar because why the hell not? Like
right.
when we lift each other up, we're lifting, it's like the boat rises with the tide.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, you never know just how common something is. And it makes you almost feel like a weight is lifted off of yourself to have that.
Absolutely.
As well. And, going through all these, growth and changes as a woman, there was something that you had said that I read that I thought was so hilarious and that I feel all the time. Is that I think you tweeted this out, the amount of people that call me ma'am now because you're out with your son.
Yes.
You're like, what is it? The ring, the baby? Yeah. Why can't I have a baby and a wedding ring and still be Miss? I know I feel this so deeply because I know most people are just trying to be polite.
Totally.
But I'm like, I am far too young to be ma'am. Yes. And it's like, as a woman too, you're like, no, like that just cracked me up. That was the most relatable thing. I just had to bring that up.
Oh my God. I feel that so hard. I'm like, you know what? I'm still like reading like sci-fi and fantasy. Okay.
Right?
I am not a ma'am.
I listen to Chapel Roan.
Yeah.
I know.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. It's so good. But it's also too one of those things like as you are, going through new chapters of your life and marriage and motherhood and all that kind of stuff. And as an athlete too, and kind of holding on to different parts of your own personality, what has that experience been like in growing through those things?
So like basically like being like
like almost, like a
Yeah.
public figure as
Yeah.
well too, and saying, okay, you guys first met me here, and now I've gone through these new chapters and new versions of myself, and kind of evolving in a public and a front facing way.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. That's a tough question. That was yeah, because I feel like, I don't know. I feel like, naturally you evolve as a human being, and then people just kind of come along for the ride. But you're absolutely right. Like, when I first started at Peloton, I was single. I wasn't married. I wasn't thinking about having a baby.
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't a ma'am. I think everybody was calling me Miss at that point.
Deep in the Miss era.
I was very deep in the Miss era. And so, I mean, it is definitely like, as you evolve and you take on different, like, new challenges too, right? Like, I got into golf while I was a Peloton instructor, and now I'm so deep into that sport. Like, it was 2020 that I really started playing when we had the pandemic, and I was with my now husband. We were dating at the time, and I was like, oh, this is like really a huge part of your life, and like, I don't have anything else to do. And we were staying at his folks' house when we were like, lockdown.
It's a great way to spend a day outside.
Yes.
And social. Golf was great during the pandemic. It's like, wait, you mean I get to be in the grass and nature outside and nobody else is around? Yes.
Amazing. It was amazing for that. And then also, like, you get to social distance, but you still get to be like social, and you're outside, and it's like, so it was like, it kind of took me by storm. Like, I became viciously obsessed with the sport. I was, like I said, I don't half-ass anything. I put my whole ass into it. And so then not only did I become obsessed with the sport to like better myself, then I was like, everything that I do, like, as a fitness, like, I started thinking about it from that perspective, like from the perspective of the trainer that I am, and started thinking about like, kinematic sequence and all of those things. And I ended up getting like certified through the Titleist Performance Institute, and I actually created the very first strength and mobility for golfers program at Peloton. So you're right. It really, these evolutions as you change as a person really do affect what you do in your life and in your career. But for me, it's felt like it's been in such a like organic way, and I've been able to, with a platform like Peloton, they're so wonderful. They've allowed me to kind of grow and do, and really access some of these passions that I have, and expertise, and kind of marry my passions and my expertise to create like really fun new content.
Right. And like you said, you don't half-ass it, you whole-ass it. Not only are you going to be playing golf, but you're going to be teaching other people how to optimize their golf with this. That is such an interesting way to approach it. It's just like, okay, let's start this Peloton class, because people don't think about it. They think, oh, let me go out to the driving range.
Sure.
Let me go to the putting green. But like you said, a rotational sport and building the muscles needed for it.
And also like teaching your body how to move in a way that's going to help you have, good form essentially, or come up with good swing mechanics. Like something I talk about in my golf program is disassociation. Like, can you rotate your upper body while keeping your lower body stable? Can you rotate your lower body while keeping your upper body stable? These are all key aspects to being able to like have a mechanically sound swing, because kinematic sequence would have you rotating your lower body first, then your trunk, then your arms, and then finally the club head. So it's like those little things that you wouldn't necessarily think of, and you're like, okay, these moves make sense, because it's kind of training your body, like that neuromuscular, connection, to like understand how to make this move, or essentially optimize the move.
And how do you do it in a way that, okay, this is that, I'm curious too, how do you translate that to the Peloton app and different, like, is it, okay, let's do this exercise, and do you tell people this is how it helps your swing, or are you, how do you translate that?
Yeah, kind of. So like in the program, I talk about kinematic sequence, and I talk about like essentially like what the ideal way it is for your body to move to create like the best, the more optimal like swing, right? And everybody will have a different swing. There's no swing that's alike.
Right.
And so depending on what your body can do is going to depend on what your swing is going to be. And so you want to like work with what you got essentially, but at the same time, you want to also try to heighten whatever it is. So like, here's an example. Say you find that you don't have a lot of great rotation with your upper body. Then you would probably want to focus on like mobility work that's going to help you get that rotation.
It's so interesting too, because the New York City Marathon was recently, relatively within the last few days, weeks. Where are we in time? I don't know. It was recent.
It was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was
last week.
It was last week. Yeah, there's a lot of things that have happened, and it feels like time is expanding.
It was the 3rd of November. I know that. So depending on what day it is today.
So we just had the New York City Marathon, early November.
Yeah.
And I, much like many New Yorkers, decided, I want to run a marathon.
Yeah.
And I have seen this, and I've gone through this motion so many times as a just lay person who, tried to get out of running the mile every week in PE and suddenly after college was like, maybe I could be an athlete, and every time I thought I want to run a marathon, I was like, I'll train for a half marathon, I'll do that, and then I'll do a whole one. I've run a handful of half marathons. And every time I have finished a half marathon, I think I cannot imagine doing that twice. I feel like, though, there's some level of just a mental hurdle there, too.
Yeah.
And, when you've got, people in your classes or people you're coaching or people you're working with that are like, this is the goal I have, but I am hitting this mental block here. I don't know if my body is physically capable of it. How do you encourage people to get over those mental blocks, whether they be in running, in fitness, in life, what have you?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, we have so many members that it's rare that I have people, well, at least not during class time, right? They'll come up afterwards. But yeah, I guess like the mental wall thing is very real. I think like anything else, it's kind of like you make when you decide to try something new, right? Like whether it's, if you said, okay, I'm going to try this marathon, but it's scary. Like, first of all, you made the choice to attempt this new thing. Good on you. Like, you're amazing just for being brave enough to say, I'm going to try something new. And then if it scares you, good.
Right.
It should.
Yeah.
Because if it didn't scare you, then that probably you need to shoot for something higher.
Then there's
better.
not a lot of growth in it.
Yeah.
And I think you got to make peace with the fact that not everyone is going to win their first marathon, unlike some people at this table right here. I cannot get over how impressive that is. I know you can minimize and say, oh, there's only 400 people in Nova Scotia, whatever. That is still, wow. That is such an accomplishment. And just kind of facing these and tackling these hurdles in life and all that kind of stuff. It's such an impressive journey that you've had, and I'm excited to watch it continue to unfold.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and I'm really grateful for you coming on this show today, Selena. Thank you so much for joining us. Selena Samuela, Peloton instructor, mother, sister, wonderful, inspiring human, is our guest this week on the Her Playbook podcast presented by Kendra Scott, the jewelry company that's shining bright and doing good. Shop jewelry styles designed for every day and every occasion at your local Kendra Scott store or at kendrascott.com.